My name is Virginie Malicier. I am manager price reporting for EMEA Middle Distillate team in London. And today I will talk about the impact of airspace closures and geopolitical conflict on jet fuel costs. So the main factor of jet fuel prices are actually the price of crude oil and notably crude oil future. So we can see that around 70% of the price of oil product is based on the price of crude oil, which is itself depend on physical fundamental as well as a certain part on sentiment, whether or not there is a risk of supply. Then the rest will depend on the strength of the middle distillate market in general and the jet fuel market in particular. Middle distillate, jet fuel, and diesel are mainly supply driven because Europe is short jet fuel and short diesel. Therefore, any disruption to the supply or risk of disruption to the supply will have an impact on prices. Geopolitical conflict can sometimes disrupt the supply chain of jet fuel. It can be also pandemic, like for example, COVID. But in terms of geopolitical conflict, for example, war in the Middle East or war in Ukraine, this had led to some disruption, but they were not that big in terms of long-term impact on prices, but had definitely an impact of prices during a certain period of time, mainly weeks. So, for example, when the war broke out in Ukraine, what we saw is that people stopped buying jet fuel or any oil product from Russia on the spot market. Europeans didn't want to be seen buying Russian product, even if the product was still legal. So it was a sort of boycott, and suddenly prices increased because the market thought, well, if we don't get middle distillate from Russia, then we will need to get it from elsewhere. We will need to price higher to attract product. On the other hand, we saw also disruption in the January 2024 because of the attack at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So basically, the Red Sea route and the Suez Canal are one of the main routes for supply to come from east of Suez, from the Red Sea, obviously, the Persian Gulf, the west coast of India, or further east, like South Korea or China, to Europe to supply the Mediterranean with jet fuel and to supply Northwest Europe. Because of the attack, the Houthi attack at the western vessel at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, many tankers decided to stop taking the Suez Canal route and decided to divert around the Cape of Good Hope, which means that a typical long-range tanker going from the Persian Gulf to Northwest Europe will take now 40 days instead of 20 days to reach Europe. So when that happened, there were many weeks where no resupply was coming to Europe and prices jumped. And since then, the market has adapted and prices have stabilized. What airlines do in order to prevent their balance sheet to be hurt by big increase in aviation fuel prices, they hedge their fuel. So in the short term, they hedge using Plattsif Northwest European swaps. So these are some type of derivative that can be traded over the counter, but also on intercontinental exchange. And they also use crude future to hedge their jet fuel prices. So typically, in order to hedge for 2025, when they're at the beginning of the year, they use the swaps, the jet fuel derivatives. And to use further ahead in the coming years, they use crude future. So that's one way they have in order to prevent big increase in prices to hurt their balance sheet. But also what happens when you have airspace closure. So you have flight cancellation. So you can expect a drop in jet fuel demand due to flight cancellation. But at the same time, airspace closure means that many airplanes will have to take longer route to reach their destination. For example, because of the Russian airspace closure to Western aircraft, many airlines like British Airways or Air France have to do longer routes to reach, for example, France or the UK to Japan. So it has even become uncompetitive for some airline to go from Northwest Europe to Japan because of the airspace closure, and other airlines that don't face this airspace closure have become more competitive. So typically, airspace closure, like for example, the closure of Iran airspace recently, around mid-June, led to many flights having to take longer route to reach the Middle East from Northwest Europe. But some aviation fuel suppliers have told us that they have seen an increase in jet fuel consumption due to this airspace closure. So overall, the airspace closure have a negative impact for airline because it generally means more fuel consumption. And the second negative impact for airline is that generally airspace closure don't impact all airlines. Some airlines will be more impacted than others and be less competitive. The airline industry has known over the years many geopolitical events that have enormously impacted oil prices. So, like I explained before, they have learned to hedge prices. And what they have learned as well is they can adapt their routes, and they can also replace their old aircraft by newer, more fuel-efficient aircraft. So many airlines have used the pandemic as the opportunity to retire their oldest aircraft, their more energy-hungry aircraft, by smaller ones, like, for example, Boeing 737 MAX, which is used by Ryanair. And Ryanair is one of the most fuel-efficient airline, and because it uses less fuel per number of passengers. Just to give you an example. So you have also the big legacy airline like British Airways or Air France, which have retired their oldest aircraft, like typically the 747. And now they can save money by using 25% less fuel. That's one way of reducing cost. In terms of alternative fuel, airlines have known about the EU mandate for 2% SAF minimum starting this year, 2025, for many years, probably around 10 years. So they had a lot of time to prepare for that. So one way, of course, is they can increase ticket prices. And also we have seen how airlines have been able to lower the cost of basic ticket and then make people pay for luggage. And the heavier you are, the more fuel you use. But also what airlines do is that they reduce the passenger luggage weight that they carry, and they can take some cargo as well. So there has been like a sort of commercial way for airlines to compensate for rising costs. Any airspace closure and any war in any region of the globe adds a lot of uncertainty for the outlook for airline. So what we can see is that there are always trends in terms of where people go on holiday. So the trends depend not only on the geopolitical situation, whether they consider a country to be safe, but also whether a currency is advantageous for them. For example, since the Arab Spring, we have seen much fewer tourists going to Tunisia or Egypt, and many more have gone to Greece instead, as an example. But we can see lately that whenever the dollar is weak, we have seen this past couple of weeks, the yen being weak, then we've seen many more people going to Japan on holiday. So it means that airline has to respond very quickly to any change in trends and also adapt their routes to destination where more tourists will want to go. Already we have sustainable aviation fuel, so you can blend up to 50% sustainable aviation fuel made primarily in Europe out of used cooking oil. In the future, there will be other alternative fuel, so-called e-fuel. There are also projects to create a battery power aircraft. So you can imagine having a battery power aircraft with a backup engine as well. But this will all be more challenging than for road vehicles because you need to be absolutely certain that no problem will happen, that you have backup, and any battery power aircraft will weigh much more. So there is definitely technology. People are also betting on hydrogen as a technology of the future to power aircraft. But for the moment, introducing sustainable aviation fuel to more and more flights departing from Europe. And then we are also relying on the technology to improve, to lower the cost emission of flying. Thank you for your attention today. So now we have been talking about the primary factor that influence jet fuel pricing in the aviation industry, see how airline can hedge future prices in order to be able to adapt to disruption in the supply chain as well as fast increase in prices. We have seen how airline face airspace closure and change in tourist trend. We have also spoken about the aviation industry future in terms of alternative fuel and further geopolitical tension.